In this video, guys, we're going to be looking at the extracellular components and how cells are able to form connections between each other and communicate with each other. Um, so extracellular components and communications between cells help coordinate cellular activities. Most cells synthesize and secrete materials to the outside of the cell. These extracellular materials and structures are involved in many of the essential cellular functions that are needed um, within your body. So let's talk about a component of the cell walls that is component of plants that is different from animal cells, which are cell walls. The cell wall is an extracellular structure, and it helps distinguish plant cells and animal cells from each other. There are some prokaryotes, there are some fungi, and then there are some protists that have cell walls. So it's not unique to just plants, but it's a major difference between plants and animals. The cell wall protects the plant cell, and it helps maintain the shape. It's a structural component that's also responsible for building the cell, plants, and it prevents excessive uptake of water and the loss of water too. Plant cell walls are made of cellulose fibers that are embedded in other polysaccharides and proteins. But the it's very structurally, it's very complex, and it's usually very hard to, if you're thinking of it as like from what I'm thinking of it is from like an animal perspective, it's hard to digest. Plant cell walls have multiple layers. There are the primary cell wall, which is relatively thin and flexible. It's usually secreted first. Um, and then there's the middle lamella, which is the thin layer between the primary walls, containing polysaccharides called pectins. The pectins kind of like a glue. Um, so if your plant cells, your two plant cells next to each other, those plant cells will excrete the primary cell wall, and those walls are kind of like glued together. So I always consider plant cells as like bricks, like if you're bricking a house. The bricks themselves are, are the hard cell walls of those cells, and then we use the cement and stuff like that to glue the bricks together, which would be kind of like the middle lamella. Now, some plant cells, not all plant cells, will develop a secondary cell wall, and it's added between the plasma membrane and the primary cell wall. And the secondary cell wall can be quite large, actually, very thick. And so what you're seeing here, so if you're looking at the space between two different cells, which were here, these are two different cells. So the gray area here would be the inside of the cells. You have the plasma membrane would then be located on the inside of this secondary cell wall. So the plasma membranes for your cells will be located here. Now you have what they shaded in orange as the primary cell wall. So the primary cell wall was excreted first, and then it comes into contact with the other cell and forms the middle lamella. The middle lamella is, like I said, kind of like the glue that glues these cells together. Now, the cell, as it gets older, depending on what kind of cell it is, for example, it will produce a very thick secondary cell wall, and it will excrete that out, which is kind of like it pushes the primary cell wall further out until it comes into contact with the next cell. So plant cells are in my analogy are kind of like bricks as if like you're bricking something. And so it's very structurally stable. Animal cells do not have cell walls, but they are covered by a very elaborate matrix called the extracellular matrix. The extracellular matrix is made up of glycoproteins such as collagen, proteoglycans, and fibronectin. And these are all different kinds of proteins um, and carbohydrates that form these very complex structures of the extracellular matrix. Fibronectin and the other proteins of the extracellular matrix bind to what we call receptor proteins in the plasma membrane called integrins. Now, these receptor proteins are responsible for a lot of the cell to cell communication. It's it the extracellular matrix has a very important job and role in maintaining cell to cell communication and maintaining structure and component like being um, associated with your next cell, your neighbor. And so this image here is showing you the plasma membrane, the what we call the full fluid mosaic model, and the extracellular matrix there, which contains collagen fibers, fibronectin, and other proteoglycan carbohydrates and proteins. Now, the ECM has an influential role in the lives of cell. It can regulate a cell's behavior by communicating with the cell through the integrins. The ECM around a cell can influence the activity of the genes of the nucleus. Um, this is based on signaling may occur, and it causes the cytoskeleton to change and trigger chemical signals in the cell. So plants and animal cells have they're built in different ways in that plant cells have the cell wall, but they're directly touching the next cell. They're in direct cell touching. And then animal cells are they have direct cell touching through the extracellular matrix. But being able to uh, form a junction to with your neighbor is important in developing, for example, tissues and organs, um, being adhered and being able to communicate with your direct neighbor through physical contact is very important. Plant cells do it in a very unique way because you have these huge, thick walls that prevent things from traveling from easily from one cell to the next. So they have these special channels called plasmodesmata. These plasmodesmata, that's such a long word. I always like it's one of this is an aside, it's one of my favorite words because it's so kind of weird and long. But it's the special channels that connect plant cells together. Through plasmodesmata, water and other small solutes like proteins and RNA can pass from one cell to the next. Plasmodesmata is very important for cell signaling in plant cells. So this is showing you a cell wall that exists between two plant cells. And then you have these huge channels between them, which are the plasmodesmata. Now, plasmodesmata will not allow for large units to travel from one cell to the next. So plant cells, once they build their very strong supportive cell walls, it also prevents from things from traveling, large molecules from traveling from cell to cell. So if a cell was to need something, it's basically on its own. It's going to have to build these large molecules on its own. In animal cells, though, uh, plant cells have the ability. to undergo photosynthesis, so they have the ability to build all the molecules that they need. Animal cells do not. So animal cells form junctions in a different way, because having the ability to share large molecules and proteins with each other is important. So they have three different kinds of junctions in animal cells. There's tight junctions, which form very tight, almost like I think of tight junctions kind of like zippers, like a Ziploc bag, the zipper. And they are very pressed together, and they basically zip the neighboring cells together. Tight junctions are important in several different parts of your body, because they prevent leakage of extracellular fluid. One of the areas of your body that is important for tight junctions is your intestines, because you don't want things to leak from your intestines into the outer membranes or compartments. Another form of tight junction is desmosomes. These are your anchoring junctions. They fasten cells together in these strong sheets. I always think of desmosomes as like Velcro. They to me in my mind they function like Velcro, in that they're sheets that hold, once they adhere, they hold things together. Uh, a great example of desmosomes is, have you ever had a blister? Have you ever had like a small blister form really quick? Like you pinch your skin and then the blister will form. Well, basically what's happening is you're accidentally breaking the desmosomes, and separating those layers of cells, and fluid will fill up underneath that and form a blister. A third type of cell junction is the gap junctions. These are the communicating junctions. Basically, they provide a what we call cytoplasmic channels between adjacent cells. These are literally channels that allow for cells to directly communicate with each other. And so in this diagram, you're seeing the three different types of junctions. You have your tight junctions, which can be interweaved. It's almost like zipping the cells together, and it prevents leaking between the cells. The desmosomes here, like I said, they remind me of kind of like Velcro, in that they will attach to each other and keep the cells like adjoined. And then you have your gap junctions that allow for cell to cell communication, that allows for things to travel from one cell to the next. And then the last part of this chapter is the idea that a cell is greater than the sum of its parts. None of the cell's components work alone. Nothing just does something on its own. There's always constant movement, constant nucleus, control. For example, a macrophage's ability to destroy bacteria involves the whole cell, um, the coordinating components of like the cytoskeleton, lysosomes, the plasma membrane. Everything works together to do the job that it's supposed to do. And in this image, you can see, so this is a macrophage, which is a white blood cell, and it's searching out for bacteria, to find and destroy and engulf. So that concludes chapter 6. In the next chapter, we're going to be looking at the plasma membrane.